Forms. Forms are one of those things that you absolutely have to get right. They're present in almost every UI design, every website or app. And so today I'm going to be showing you form basics and form fundamentals, and we'll be designing one for this layout that we've been working on throughout this course. And then afterwards, you have a challenge where you need to design a sign-up/registration form for this layout, which we've also been working on throughout this series. So buckle up, let's get ready. Make sure to subscribe here if you haven't yet. Check out DesignCourse.com and let's get started. All right, everybody. So as you can see, definitely want to go to lesson 6 form design right here, and you will see this. So this is one of the early layouts that we've created before. We worked on a couple times, and now we're going to assume that we're working on a contact page, which obviously will have a form. So I already designed kind of like a sub page could possibly look like, and I've already designed parts of this. I don't want to focus on anything other than form elements in this video just to make it go quicker. So a contact us page is really one of the most simplistic forms that you can have outside of like a login form or something like that. And we want to have a few fields. I would say at minimum 2 for a contact form, obviously for the email, and then the message. If you count the call to action, the input button, that would be 3. But we're going to do basically 2 different text fields, a name, email, and then a text area as well, and a submit button. So the first thing that we want to do, and by the way, this big white thing up here, this is for us to hold our components, because for the first time in this UI UX course, we're actually going to work with components, and that's really to demonstrate the different states that an input element could be in. So in this context, this layout and this design right here, we have to ask ourselves, okay, well, what color is the background of our elements being like a text field for the name, right? And you have a couple options here. So for me, what I would do, let's hit the frame tool to create the actual text field element. So we can left click and just drag somewhere roughly around here, because remember, we want to fill out this space. This basically is a 2-column layout where this stuff on the right is the second column, and then this stuff is the first column. And so I'll probably make it go, right around where we have the center point marker. And when we do that, we don't have a fill, so let's add a fill. And by default, we can see that it's white. And I do want to give it a little bit of rounded corners, because we already do have rounded corners in this button up here. So you want to keep things consistent. So this is roughly the size of the text field that you would want. But one thing that's problematic about this particular text field, even though we have it has a background color, is the fact that it's sitting on a very light gray. So there's not a lot of contrast to see visually where this text field actually is. And one of the things that you could do to make it more accessible is to add a stroke around it. So when you add a stroke, we don't have to go all the way black. We can come down like to like a mid-gray, but this will make it a lot easier to see, all right? And that's real important. A lot of people, for some reason, they like text fields that you could barely see. I don't know what's up with that, but you want to make sure you can see it. You can also make the border thicker and all that good stuff. So right here is probably a good size for a text field. And your text fields, this is one of the real things that you have to pay attention to. And this is going back to UI design fundamentals. You want to make sure that you have a good amount of white space or padding on the inside of the text field itself. That is very important, and you'll see we're going to demonstrate what that looks like here in a bit. But also, we're going to design these with explicit labels. So clearly, we need to inform the user about what this text field is about. So I'm going to hit the type tool, and I'm going to left click, and I'm just going to type name. Very simple. So this is size 24, which is actually a pretty good size. I'm going to make it bold as well. I may make this a little bit larger even. So we're up to like 35 or so. So here's our name field. And you don't have to necessarily make it bold. This works as well. Now let's also demonstrate, honestly, I'm probably going to make it bold because that would establish some visual hierarchy for the element inside of it, which would actually be the value. So, this might be, John Doe. And in order to establish that visual hierarchy, we could do 2 things. We could take the boldness down to regular. And then we could also make this a little bit smaller, although you don't have to. It's just a treatment I'm applying. And there we go. So here's what a pretty good text field would look like. Notice the good amount of white space around the inside. So if we hit our auto layout button and then we shift this, if I zoom up right here to left align center, we can now drag this back out to roughly around where it was before. Now you can kind of see it's not quite centered vertically here. So one of the things that you could do to combat that is actually you can offset that based on these padding values right here. So you can select one specifically to make adjustments to either push it down or bring this up so that it's more centered vertically. Okay, so that's good. Now another thing that we also have to worry about is basically identifying or notifying the user of when there's an error. So for instance, when they submit and nothing, and they didn't fill it out, for instance, or they put characters that aren't allowed, you want to provide an explicit message identifying what the issue was, and preferably around that specific UI element, not just somewhere else by the submit button or whatever. So to do that, I'm just going to take another piece of type. And right here, I'm just going to put a generic kind of error message, like something like, sorry, this field is required. Now, I'm going to go ahead and make this a bit smaller. So we're at size 18, which is okay. And then I'm also going to make it kind of like a reddish color, not quite 100% full blast red like that, but I'm going to come out more like probably somewhere like right around here. Like that, okay? I actually might make that a little bit larger. We can make it bold as well. And we don't have to keep on using this particular font because we are using two different fonts, Inter, and the other one is Consolas. So I'll probably take these two and transition those to Inter. There we go. And then we can make the value be this Consolas, the actual placeholder value, which I kind of like. Okay. So let me reduce this white space just a bit. There we go. All right. So what I've done here is design kind of like a full experience of what a potential text field could look like. And I did all this stuff explicitly and filled it all in for a very specific reason. Because now that we have this whole kind of scaffolding for a text field, what we can now do is we can place this into first an auto layout. All right. And then if we want to, we can find, adjust the different, the white space between these values. So if I want to adjust this down or something like that, I can. But now we can also add a component. So when we click it, it's going to give it a yellow outline, but we want multiple component states, or a variance. So we're going to click Add Variant. Now, when we do this, it kind of screws up the layout, right? And what we want to do is just drag it up here. This is not a layout or anything. This is just to hold our component and our component variants or our different states. So by default, this is going to be the default state. And what I want to do is grab the overall container right here and come over where it says properties, where it says property 1, double click that. We're going to call this state. All right. So we're going to have different states for our text field. And typically those states are 3 different states. You have your default state, where it's just there. And then you have a focus state where the user has actually taken their cursor or their finger if they're on mobile and they tapped onto it, and you want to signify visually that that is the active element. And then there's an error state as well. So these are things that you want to design for if you want to be as comprehensive as possible. So the first state down here, we don't need this, sorry, this field is required for the default state. That's only going to be visible on the error state. So I'm going to take it with it selected, and I'm just going to hide the visibility right down here on the fill. Actually, no. We're going to hide the layer visibility. There we go. So we hide that, and we'll want to do it for this one as well. So we'll hide that. And essentially, This as well, this filled in state, this element, I don't want to see that for the default state. So I'm going to hide that. Now, this is going to be the focus state right here. So if we go back to the first state, the default state, we can see it's called default, which is fine. This one, we want to change it from variant 2 to focus. All right. Now for focus, I do want to leave in the value of what it looks like when somebody actually types in, because a front-end developer needs to know what that looks like because it's all stylable in CSS. And there are ways, more advanced ways in prototyping within Figma to actually allow you, when you're playing the prototype, to type in these fields, these text fields. But we're not going to mess with that because that's a little bit more advanced. But if we just want to show real quickly what a value looks like inside of a text field, then you can just have it, John Doe, something like that. That's fine. Another thing that we need to focus on, like I said, is when you're on the focus state, we have to signify visually that this is the currently active element that you're typing into. And one of the ways that you could do that is to take the actual frame, the text field container, and you can make the stroke bold. So if you come down here, you can see it's at size 1. We can bump this up to around 3. And now it's going to give us a nice visual indicator this is the currently active element. Okay, so now that that's good, we're going to take this state right here and we're going to add another one by clicking plus. This is going to be called, instead of state 3, we're going to call this one error. All right, and this is going to be our error state. And oh wait, did I not? I want to make sure that I actually, oh, okay, yeah. We want to bring the visibility of this back. So we bring that back. And we're not seeing it right now. We have to pull this down. There we go. And also, when a field is errored or in an error state, you also want to have a visual indicator for that. So what I would do is just take this same red color that we used on the type beneath it, and we will outline this in red. You could also change this to be that red as well. And I think that would be a good idea. That way they understand fully the label, the form element, and all this tells them that this is an error. Okay, so now we have our 3 different states. And what we can do is we can now grab them. If we go to assets, we can see right there, we can just drag it right on. Isn't that fun? Okay, so now what I can do is we can duplicate this. And for this one, I can double click here and change this to email. So now we have our name and email field. And now that we have 2 of them, let's select both and add an auto layout. So click plus right here. So now we can control the white space between these elements if we wish. All right. And we also need to have a text area for the message. Now, a text field is typically just one line like this. A text area is exactly like a text field where you type in, but it's usually multi-line. It's going to have more height to it. And so when you do that, you would want to recreate this whole structure except in the context of a text area. You would also want to recreate all the different states for all the other elements that might be present in your UI. So that would include things like checkboxes, radio buttons, input, submit buttons, drop-down select menus. There's a lot. There's a lot of things that you can style. So what we can do is duplicate this, and I'm going to right-click and choose Detach Instance. So let me show you that again. Detach Instance right there when you right-click, and then it takes it outside of being just an instance of that component. It's no longer a component, and I can double-click here and change this to like message, for instance, and I can also take this and give ourselves a nice height for the text field, or the text area rather. So now we can double click into this, and this time we can create a new component by selecting it, and I'm going to take it and rip it up all the way up there and just drag it, and then click on this add variant button, and we can do the same thing. So now we can add our thicker stroke for the focus state, and then you could duplicate this, add another variant and just recreate this stuff over here as well if you wish. To save time, I'm not going to bother with that. And then another thing that we want to do is we want to switch to prototype mode to get all this stuff working. And I already did that because actually, full disclosure, I did this whole tutorial already, but my camera ran out of space, so I have to redo it. So sorry, this stuff's already hooked up, but let me detach all this stuff. Frustrating. Okay, so basically what you want to do is switch to the prototype tab up here, and we're going to double click this, and I don't know why that's hiding. There we go. And we want to drag this little plus button, the blue plus button in the middle, to this bottom one. And so on click, it's going to change to this state to show what the focus state and what type text looks inside of it. You'll see how this all works in a second. And then we're going to do the same thing here. So when somebody clicks on this state, it'll show what the error state's supposed to look like. And then vice versa, if somebody clicks on the error state, it'll go back to the very default state up top. And then we could do the same thing right here, just between these two different states. We'll click and add that. There we go. Okay, so now if we go back to assets, we can see we have one called text field, one called frame 14. You would really want to go back here and find that frame 14, double click, and change that to a suitable name like text area or something like that. So now if we go back to assets, we can drag our text area. We want to make sure our text area is inside of this element here, so we can just drag it in and then drag this back up, and now we have our states. If we click, if we take our frame, select it, and hit play up here, this is what it should look like now. Ooh, that's not working. Okay, so that's those two are okay. So those two states are not working properly. So let's, because it's not showing the error state. So, I see why. It says on drag. Now what can happen is if you look up here for this particular state, we have a click, which is, you know, this isn't correct. We want to get rid of this, change this to click. Now it should be going to error. So now if we go back here and click this, there you go. Now it's showing the full state from default to focus to error here as well. Awesome. Okay, so finally, what's the other thing that you need? The last thing that you need here as a part of a contact form at least would be the call to action. So look at the existing design that you're working with, because in your challenge coming up here in a second, which we'll take a look at, you have an existing layout already. So there's already a button up here that we can draw inspiration from, right? So I can just copy this by holding Alt and left clicking and dragging. Make sure it's a part of our auto layout right here. Just, oh no, things are getting all discombobulated. Let's name, email, message, there we go. And what I'll do is just change this to send message. I didn't set this up correctly. So let's adjust that and then just manually adjust this. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. Send message. Okay, that's fine. And so this would be a suitable contact form in this case. I might reduce the white space between the elements just a bit, but notice the grouping, name or label rather, and element, and then more white space here. So that's typically what you want to follow in terms of your groupings and your white space, vertically speaking. So now we're going to switch things up and focus on our form design challenge. And so some of you may recognize this one. We already worked on this a couple different times throughout this 30-day series. And now we're going to simulate what happens when somebody clicks on join up to a join up form, a sign up form basically. And so this one has rules, and it's going to tell you all the forms that we need. So first we're going to have a first name, an email address field, and that's text field. These are all text fields. A password and confirm password. Technically isn't a text field, it's a password field because when somebody types in, it'll automatically change to asterisks. You can simulate that if you wish. Checkbox, I agree to the terms and conditions. I'll show you how to design a real quick checkbox, and then an input or call to action button for join now. So it's a little bit more of an elaborate form. Now, for those of you who are brand new to UI UX and that type of stuff, I'll show you real quickly like what a checkbox actually looks like. So if I hit my frame F key tool, we want a square, and for a checkbox, and we want to give a background, a stroke. We'll add a little bit of corner border radius, maybe make the stroke thicker. And this would be the default state of a checkbox. It's very simple. You can also have, I also want you to demonstrate what it looks like when somebody clicks on it, which means there would be a checkbox. You can do it, you can create that checkbox on your own with the pen tool by hitting P, holding Shift, and then creating like a little checkbox like this. Get that centered up. That's like a pretty good checkbox right here, or check mark. White space all around. You don't want checkboxes that look like this. That's terrible. White space, let it breathe, okay? And if you don't like your own checkbox, you can right click and go to Iconify. If you've installed it already as a plugin, it's free, and just type in check, and guess what? You have checkbox or check marks right here that you could just left click and drag into and be done with essentially. Okay, and then of course also the value, I agree to the terms and conditions. You would put this right here. You could put these in auto layout as well. And then also you need to signify what the link looks like for them to read the terms and conditions. And you could do that by selecting the text like terms, clicking right here, and then clicking underline for the text decoration. All right, so that's enough of the hints that you get. Oopsie. This is up to you in terms of how you want to structure this. I would definitely say you don't want to have text fields that are this large, that span all the way across. You don't want that. If you only want to have one column and that's it, then take this and make your own little column that's centered in here. So for instance, it might look like your text fields might look like this. Or you could have do what he did over here with a two-column approach. So you could have on the left column your form, and then some information that could be relevant on a sign-up form in the second column. And it doesn't have to be 50-50. It could be like 60% of this could be the form, and then the 30% width of the column next of it, or 40 rather, could be your other content of some sort. And that's up to you. And so you can have this extend up here or here. I'm letting a lot of creative control over this one. Just make sure everything is legible, a lot of good white space, nothing too close together or too far apart. All right, now also obviously to submit this so that I can review this in tomorrow's video, check out the description here for submissions instructions, and I'm looking forward to seeing all of your designs here, and I will do as many as I can. I get too many, so don't get mad if I don't review yours. It's just, that's what you have to deal with, because I can't do reviews for like 25 of these. It's ridiculous. So anyhow, hopefully you enjoyed that, and I'll see you tomorrow. Goodbye.